Have you ever found yourself caught in a moment where something unexpected happens, and suddenly your whole world shifts? What if that moment came from the last person you ever expected? This is the story of Mark, a man in his 40s, living a quiet life with his teenage son, Tyler. What begins as an ordinary routine of picking up his son from baseball practice quickly turns into something much more intense and life-changing. Meet Coach Adrian, Tyler's coach, a man who's confident, athletic, and way younger than Mark. But there's something about him that draws Mark in, something he can't quite explain. In today's video, you'll learn how one glance, one smile, and one unexpected conversation can turn an ordinary life upside down. We'll take you through the complicated emotions of forbidden attraction, the tension that builds with every encounter, and the heartbreaking realization that what Mark feels could change everything, forever. Stick with us till the end to find out how Mark navigates this whirlwind of desire and guilt and whether or not he can truly find happiness in the most unexpected place. It's a story of love, risk, and self-discovery you won't want to miss. If you're ready to dive into a story full of passion, conflict, and self-discovery, then don't go anywhere. Welcome to the channel. Be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any more stories like this. Let's get started. I'm Mark. 45 years old, divorced. I live with my teenage son, Tyler, in a quiet suburb. The routine is simple: work, school, practice, dinner, repeat. But lately, something had started to stir beneath the surface of my life. Tyler had recently joined a local baseball team. He was serious about it. Early mornings, late afternoons, he was always at the field, practicing hard, pushing himself to improve. As a father, I admired his drive. But if I'm being honest, I didn't expect this sport to be where my life would take an unexpected turn. That's where I first saw him. Coach Adrian, a little younger than me, maybe in his early 30s. Athletic, confident, always calm under pressure. He was the kind of guy who seemed to have everything figured out. The way he carried himself, the way he interacted with the players, there was a quiet authority about him. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but I felt it. Every time I dropped Tyler off at practice, I found myself looking at Coach Adrian. It was subtle at first, just catching glimpses of him as I waited in the car. But over time, those glances turned into something more. I'd notice the way his eyes lit up when he spoke to the kids. How he moved with purpose, his every gesture sharp and confident. I tried to ignore it, of course. He was my son's coach. There was no reason for me to feel anything beyond respect for him. He was younger than me, and besides, it felt foolish to even entertain the idea that there could be more than just professional respect. But the longer I watched him, the more something inside me stirred, something I hadn't felt in years. Something I didn't expect to feel at all. After a particularly grueling practice one afternoon, I went to pick up Tyler as usual. He had forgotten his glove, so I went back to the field to grab it for him. That's when I saw Adrian standing by the dugout, finishing up with the last few players. I walked over to him, our eyes meeting briefly before he looked away. We exchanged a few words about practice, just small talk. But there was something in his gaze that made my chest tighten. He looked at me, really looked at me, in a way that felt different. Like he saw more than just the father of one of his players. It was as if he saw something in me that no one had in years. There was an intensity to it, a quiet understanding. And in that moment, something clicked in my mind, something I wasn't ready to acknowledge, but I couldn't ignore. Later that night, as I lay in bed, I found myself thinking about that interaction. I couldn't shake the feeling that had settled in my chest. It wasn't just a passing thought, it was a deep ache, a longing I hadn't realized was there. I tried to push it away, tried to tell myself it was nothing, just an odd moment. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that it wasn't nothing. It was something that felt alive and dangerous and exciting all at once. I didn't want to admit it. Hell, I wasn't even sure what it was. But I knew this: the quiet, ordinary life I had with Tyler was no longer the same. And I had no idea what to do about it. Over the next few weeks, things between Coach Adrian and I became different. At first, it was small interactions, just casual greetings after practice or quick exchanges of words as I waited for Tyler. Nothing too significant. But the more I saw him, the more it felt like there was an unspoken connection between us. Tyler, of course, was oblivious. He was wrapped up in his games, his practices, his usual teenage world. I didn't mind. I liked seeing him so passionate about something. But each time I picked him up from practice, I found myself watching Adrian a little longer, wondering if he was feeling the same tension I was. And when he smiled at me, just that small curve of his lips, my heart would skip a beat. It was like a secret we shared, unspoken but real. One evening, after a particularly long practice, it started to rain. Tyler was still in the locker room, chatting with the other players, so I decided to wait in my car, watching the rain splatter against the windshield. A few minutes later, Coach Adrian came running to his car, drenched from the rain. I hesitated for a moment, then made the decision to get out and walk over to him. "You forgot your jacket," I said, holding out the spare coat I always kept in the car. He looked surprised, then chuckled. "Thanks, Mark," he said, his voice warmer than usual. It felt like a small moment, but in that rain, it was so much more. We stood there for a few moments, just looking at each other. I didn't know what to say, didn't know if I should say anything at all. And then Adrian spoke again, his voice quieter now. "Would you want to grab a coffee sometime? Just to talk." I was taken aback. A coffee? Outside of practice? It felt like a step forward, but I didn't know if I was ready for it. Still, something inside me urged me to agree. "I'd like that," I said, before I could stop myself. "Tomorrow." We exchanged numbers then and there. The moment felt like something more than just a friendly gesture. It felt like a decision. Something had shifted, and now we both knew it. The next day, I found myself waiting nervously at the small cafe we'd agreed on. I hadn't been out in a while, not since my divorce. The place was cozy, with soft lights and warm smells. Adrian arrived just a few minutes later, his presence still as calming as ever. We talked about everything and nothing. About Tyler's improvement at practice, about his own experience with coaching. It was easy, natural. But there was an undercurrent between us, something deeper than just small talk. Every word we shared felt charged, like it held more weight than it should. I couldn't help but notice how close we were sitting. The way his eyes lingered just a little too long when he spoke. His laughter, soft, genuine, seemed to draw me in even more. I hadn't realized how much I missed human connection until I felt it with him. But even as I enjoyed the conversation, I kept reminding myself, this couldn't go anywhere. He was my son's coach. He was younger. It wasn't right. But the more I tried to convince myself, the more I found myself wanting him. I couldn't ignore it any longer. By the time we finished our coffee, it felt like we had shared something significant. As we said our goodbyes, Adrian's hand brushed against mine. It was brief, just a touch, but it sent a wave of heat through my body. As I walked back to my car, I felt a mix of excitement and guilt. I wasn't sure where this was going, or if it was even something I should be pursuing. But I couldn't deny how I felt when I was around him. That night, as I lay in bed again, I couldn't stop thinking about Adrian. His smile, the way his voice made me feel at ease. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew one thing for sure. My life was about to change. A few days passed since that coffee, and I couldn't get Adrian out of my mind. Our casual conversation had left an impression on me, deeper than I wanted to admit. I had tried to push it aside, to focus on my life with Tyler, but it was hard when every time I saw Adrian, that spark, whatever it was, flickered to life again. It was a Thursday evening when I got a message from Adrian, asking if I could pick Tyler up early from practice. The team was wrapping up a bit earlier than usual, and Adrian needed to leave right away. I agreed, not thinking much of it at first. I was used to picking Tyler up, no big deal. But when I arrived at the field, it was just Adrian standing by the dugout. The rain had started to fall lightly, and the field was almost empty. He waved me over, and for a moment, I felt a mix of anticipation and confusion. "Tyler left his bag in the locker room," he said, sounding a little embarrassed. "Could you grab it for me? I'll wait here." I nodded and walked to the locker room, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the stillness of the field. When I returned, I handed him the bag, our hands brushing for a moment longer than necessary. "You didn't have to do that," Adrian said, his voice softer than usual. "But I appreciate it." I smiled, trying to brush off the feeling that was creeping up inside me. I couldn't explain it, but something about the way he was looking at me made my pulse race. "It's no trouble," I said, a little too quickly. I glanced around, suddenly aware of the intimacy of the moment. The rain, the quiet evening, just the two of us standing there, it was different. Adrian seemed to sense it, too. "I'm glad you came out here." I didn't want to seem like I was asking too much, but I've been thinking about our last conversation. I wasn't sure what to say. My heart was pounding in my chest. "What about it?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "You said you'd like to talk more." And I was wondering, he trailed off, clearly hesitating. Then he looked at me, and for a brief second, I saw something in his eyes, something raw. "Would you want to come back to my place for a while? Just talk. It's been a long day, and I thought it might be nice to relax." I felt a rush of heat flood my face. It wasn't a simple invitation, it was something more. Something between us that we both seemed to be acknowledging without saying it outright. I could have easily said no. I could have stuck to the plan and kept it simple, kept it professional. But my heart was already saying yes before my mind had a chance to catch up. I wasn't sure what was pulling me in, but I didn't want to fight it anymore. "I'll come," I said before I could stop myself. The ride to Adrian's place felt surreal. I couldn't believe I was doing this. My mind was racing, filled with questions and doubts. What if I was making a mistake? What if this was crossing a line I shouldn't even be near? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't just about crossing a line, it was about discovering something new, something I had been missing for a long time. It was about feeling alive again. And Adrian, with his calm demeanor and quiet strength, made me feel things I hadn't felt in years. When we arrived at his apartment, I followed him inside. It was modest, but it had a warmth to it, something inviting. He offered me a seat on the couch, and we both sat there, the silence stretching between us. For a few moments, neither of us spoke. The tension in the room was palpable, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was expectant. Like something was about to happen, but neither of us knew exactly what. Finally, Adrian broke the silence. "I wasn't sure if you'd say yes. But I'm glad you did." I looked at him, and there it was again, the way he looked at me. With an intensity that made my heart skip. "I'm glad, too," I replied, though I wasn't sure if I was speaking to him or to myself. We sat there for a while longer, talking about small things, work, Tyler, even the weather. But the more we talked, the more I found myself drawn to him. His laughter was warm, genuine. The way he spoke, the way his eyes met mine, it all felt like something more than just two people chatting. It felt like a connection. A deep one. It was only later, after the conversation had shifted to a quieter tone, that I noticed how close we were sitting. The air felt thick, charged. My breathing slowed, and for the first time, I realized just how much I wanted him, how much I needed him to understand me in a way no one else could. I wasn't sure who moved first. But suddenly, our lips met. Softly at first, hesitant. Then deeper, more urgent. It wasn't a wild kiss, but it felt like the beginning of something bigger than either of us could control. Something we both knew we couldn't walk away from. The moment felt suspended in time, as though everything around us had faded into the background. It was just the two of us, together, and everything else didn't matter. We pulled away slowly, both of us breathless. Neither of us said anything for a moment. There was no need. We both knew what had just happened. And we both knew it couldn't go back to how it was before. I stayed at Adrian's that night. We didn't rush anything, but the connection was undeniable. Something inside me had shifted, something I couldn't take back. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to. That night, as I lay there, Adrian's arm wrapped around me, I realized that everything I thought I knew about my life was now in question. What had started as something small, just a glance, a touch, had turned into something that would change everything. And I wasn't sure I was ready for it, but I couldn't bring myself to walk away. The next morning, I woke up slowly, feeling the weight of the events from the night before pressing down on me. For a moment, I almost didn't want to open my eyes, as though I could stay in the dreamlike state for just a little longer. But reality had a way of creeping in, and the quiet morning light soon filled the room. Adrian was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table, sipping coffee. His presence felt familiar, yet foreign, like we had crossed some line, but neither of us was ready to talk about it. Not yet, anyway. Good morning, he said when he saw me stir, his voice soft but with a quiet warmth. I nodded, still not quite sure how to react. I wasn't sure what I expected, but it wasn't this calmness. This wasn't how things were supposed to be. You're up early, I said, trying to sound casual, though I could feel the tension building between us. I like the mornings, he replied with a slight smile. It's the only time I can really think. I moved over to the counter and poured myself a cup of coffee. I didn't know what I was supposed to feel, confused, guilty, excited. All of those things seemed to swirl around me in a dizzying haze. But one thing was clear, what had happened last night couldn't be undone. And despite the panic that flickered in my chest, I knew I didn't want to undo it. Tyler's going to be wondering where I am, I said after a beat, trying to ground myself in reality. I needed to go back to normal. I needed to figure out how to handle this without it completely derailing my life. Adrian didn't seem bothered by it. I understand, he said, his voice calm. You should probably get going. I could see the understanding in his eyes. He wasn't rushing me. He wasn't pushing for anything more than what had already happened. But that only made the situation more complicated. Why did it feel like we were both dancing around the truth? That last night had shifted everything between us. As I got up to leave, Adrian stood too, walking with me toward the door. His hand brushed against mine, lingering for just a moment. It was enough to send a spark through me, but neither of us said anything about it. We both knew what had happened, and yet there was a strange unspoken agreement to act like it hadn't. When I reached my car, I turned back to look at him, unsure of what to say. His expression was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes that made my heart race, something that made it clear this wasn't the end. Thanks for last night, I said, my voice steady but my heart pounding. I needed it. Adrian nodded slowly. Anytime. I drove home in silence, the weight of the situation sinking in with every passing mile. I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened, about how I felt when Adrian touched me, kissed me, and held me close. It felt real in a way that no part of my life had in years. When I walked through the door at home, Tyler was sitting on the couch, flipping through his phone. His eyes lit up when he saw me, and for a moment, I forgot everything else. This was my life now. My son. My home. The world I had built for us. Hey, Dad, Tyler greeted, not looking up from his phone. You're home early. Yeah, I said, setting my keys down on the counter. Thought I'd get back to it. But I couldn't stop thinking about Adrian. And as much as I wanted to push it aside, the connection between us wasn't going anywhere. The next few days were a blur of normalcy, filled with work, Tyler's baseball practices, and the quiet hum of daily life. But no matter how hard I tried to keep my focus on everything else, Adrian was always in the back of my mind. Every time I picked up Tyler, I found myself looking for him, hoping to catch a glimpse of him. And when I did, our eyes would meet for a fraction of a second, and in those moments, I'd feel the weight of what we'd done, of what we were both starting to feel. But things didn't just stay in that quiet space. The tension grew. It was impossible to ignore. One afternoon, after another of Tyler's practices, I stayed behind a little longer, telling myself I was just trying to make sure everything was wrapped up for him. But in reality, I was waiting for the chance to see Adrian again. And when I did, the small, familiar smile he gave me didn't do anything to ease the storm of emotions swirling inside me. Can I talk to you for a minute? Adrian asked, his voice lower than usual, as he walked over to me. Sure, I said, my heart hammering. What's up? He looked around, almost as if making sure no one was nearby. Then, without hesitation, he said, I can't stop thinking about last night. His words made my stomach flip. I wasn't ready for this. I wasn't ready to dive deeper into whatever this was, but I couldn't ignore the pull between us. I've been thinking about it, too, I admitted, my voice quiet, almost a whisper. But this isn't easy, Adrian. You're my son's coach. This isn't something I expected. He took a step closer, his gaze never leaving mine. I know. I get it. But I can't keep pretending nothing happened. For the first time since I met him, I saw something vulnerable in Adrian's eyes. It made my chest ache. He wasn't just the confident, calm coach anymore. He was a man, conflicted and unsure, just like me. I don't know where this goes, I said, my voice trembling slightly. But I can't walk away from it. I don't want to. Adrian reached out, placing a hand on my arm. It wasn't a move of possession. It was a simple gesture of understanding. And it told me everything I needed to know. We were in this together, whether we were ready for it or not. As I stood there, caught in the gravity of the moment, I realized this wasn't just about last night. It was about what came next. And what came next could change everything. But for better or for worse, I didn't think I was ready to let go. Not now. Not after everything we'd already shared. The days after that conversation with Adrian were a blur, a mixture of quiet tension and inevitable anticipation. It wasn't easy pretending everything was normal, especially when I knew that with every passing day, I was getting closer to a point where I wouldn't be able to hide what was happening inside me. I tried to focus on Tyler, on work, on the small, mundane details of life. But my mind kept drifting back to Adrian. The way his eyes looked at me, the warmth in his smile, the way his touch seemed to settle into my skin, even after it was gone. Everything about him felt like a secret I wasn't sure how to keep anymore. One evening, after another practice, Adrian texted me. It was simple, just a, "Hey, can we talk?" But the words sent a shiver down my spine. I was sitting at home, Tyler in his room, studying. It was the perfect time for us to meet again. I didn't even have to think about it. I grabbed my keys, texted Tyler that I was stepping out for a bit, and headed to Adrian's apartment. When I arrived, he was already there, waiting. His expression was serious, but there was something else in his eyes, something that pulled me in and made my chest tighten. "You came," he said, stepping aside to let me in. "Thanks." I followed him inside, trying to keep my composure. But every part of me was aware of the gravity of what was happening. We had crossed lines before, but now it felt like we were standing on the edge of something we couldn't take back. Adrian led me to the couch, where we both sat. The air between us was thick with unspoken words. Neither of us knew exactly how to navigate this, but it was clear we couldn't keep pretending we hadn't changed after that night. "I've been thinking about everything," Adrian said, his voice low. "About us, about what we're doing. And I think we need to figure out what this is. What we want." His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. I wanted to respond, but my thoughts were clouded, my emotions too tangled. On one hand, I wanted to say something, anything, to reassure him. But on the other hand, I was terrified. Terrified of the consequences. Terrified of what it might mean for Tyler, for my life. "I don't know what this is," I said quietly. "I don't know if I'm ready to know. I don't even know if this is something that should be happening." Adrian looked at me, and for the first time, I saw vulnerability in his expression. He wasn't just the confident coach anymore. He was a man, grappling with the same uncertainty I felt. "I know. But I can't ignore this. I can't ignore how I feel when I'm with you." I swallowed hard, my throat tight. "But I have a son, Adrian. This isn't just about us. This could change everything. And I don't know if I'm ready for that." He leaned in slightly, his gaze never leaving mine. "I know. But sometimes, you have to take a chance. You can't always play it safe, Mark." The words stung, but they also resonated deeply within me. I had spent so much of my life playing it safe, holding myself back, doing what was expected. But now, with Adrian, it felt like everything I thought I knew about myself was being questioned. I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years, and part of me didn't want to let that go. "I don't want to hurt anyone," I whispered, the guilt heavy in my chest. "I don't want Tyler to find out. I don't want him to think I've failed him." Adrian reached over, gently taking my hand in his. His touch was comforting, grounding me in the chaos of my thoughts. "You're not failing him," he said, his voice sincere. "You're just living your life. And Tyler's going to see that. He's going to see that you're happy, that you're taking care of yourself." I wasn't sure if that was true. I wasn't sure if I could balance this, whatever it was, with everything else I had going on. But one thing was certain, the more I saw Adrian, the more I wanted him. And that feeling wasn't something I could just ignore. As the evening wore on, we talked more, about what we wanted, about what we feared, about everything that had been left unsaid between us. There were no answers, not really, but it felt like we were finally starting to figure out where we stood. At some point, Adrian moved closer, his hand still resting gently on mine. And for the first time since I'd met him, I didn't pull away. Instead, I leaned in, our lips meeting in a kiss that was slow, tentative, but full of the weight of everything that had brought us here. When we pulled away, we both knew things were different. There was no going back. We couldn't pretend this was just a one-time thing, something that could be brushed under the rug. What we had was real, and it wasn't going away. But as I left Adrian's apartment that night, I felt a sense of unease settle in. I knew that whatever path we chose from here on out, there would be consequences. Things would never be the same. But in that moment, as I drove home, I couldn't bring myself to regret what had happened. Not yet. As I walked through the door at home, Tyler was sitting at the kitchen table, eating a snack. He looked up when he saw me, but there was something in his eyes that made me pause. "Everything okay, Dad?" he asked, his tone casual but sharp. "Yeah," I replied, forcing a smile. "Just had to take care of some things." "How was practice?" Tyler didn't answer right away, just gave me a small, knowing smile before turning back to his snack. I couldn't help but wonder if he knew something. If, somehow, he had picked up on the change in me. But for now, I pushed the thought aside. There would be time for that later. Right now, all I could think about was Adrian, and how everything had just changed. The following days felt like they were moving in slow motion. Every moment at home, every conversation with Tyler, and every practice with Adrian felt heavier, more intense. My thoughts were consumed by Adrian, by the future that was starting to unfold before me, and by the fear of the consequences. Tyler's questions had become more pointed, more observant, though he never directly asked about Adrian. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that he knew something was different, something was changing. Adrian and I continued to meet in secret, navigating the fragile line between what we wanted and what we could allow ourselves to have. We hadn't told anyone, not even our closest friends. This was ours, something we were still trying to understand, still trying to come to terms with. But every time we saw each other, it felt like the world became a little smaller, a little more suffocating. One afternoon, after another tense practice, I decided to stay and help Adrian gather up equipment. Tyler had already left with his friends, and the parking lot was nearly empty. There was a strange calm between us as we worked side by side, but it didn't last. As we finished, Adrian turned to me, his eyes locked with mine. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice steady but with an underlying tension. "About us. About where this goes." I couldn't bring myself to answer immediately. The truth was, I didn't have the answers either. It felt like we were on the edge of something, but I wasn't sure if I was ready to leap into it, especially with everything at stake. "I don't want to keep this a secret forever," Adrian continued, his hand brushing against mine as he spoke. "But I also don't want to hurt you or Tyler." The mention of Tyler made my stomach tighten. I had been living with the weight of this secret for so long, but hearing Adrian say it out loud made it real in a way that nothing else had. "I don't know what to do," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "I want to be with you, but I'm scared. I don't want to lose Tyler. I don't want him to feel like he's not enough. Or that I've failed him in some way." Adrian stepped closer, his presence comforting but full of a quiet intensity. He took my hand in his, holding it firmly. "You haven't failed him. You're trying to balance everything, Mark. And that's not easy. But we can't keep hiding this forever. It's starting to feel like we're living in two worlds, one where we're pretending nothing's changed, and another where we're both trying to figure out how to move forward." His words hung in the air, the weight of them settling between us. I wanted to say something, to offer some kind of solution, but I didn't have the answers. I couldn't promise that everything would be okay. I couldn't promise that Tyler wouldn't find out or that he would understand. "I don't want to hurt him," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "He's been through so much already." Adrian squeezed my hand, his gaze softening. "You're not hurting him by being true to yourself. By finding happiness again. It's not an easy road, but I think Tyler will see that. He'll understand that you're doing what you need to do for yourself." I wasn't sure if that was true. Could Tyler really understand? Could he see the complicated layers of my life, or would he just feel betrayed? We stood there for a moment, the weight of our conversation hanging in the air, before Adrian broke the silence. "Mark, I'm not asking you to make a decision right now. But I think we need to start thinking about what's next. What this means for both of us. And for Tyler. I nodded slowly, unsure of how to respond. I know. I've been thinking about it too. But I don't have an answer yet. Adrian didn't push. He never did. But the unspoken understanding between us was there. We couldn't keep living in the shadows. Sooner or later, we'd have to confront the reality of what we had, and what it would mean for the future. As I drove home that evening, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting. Something was about to change. But I didn't know if I was ready for it. When I walked through the door, Tyler was sitting on the couch, his eyes glued to his phone. He glanced up when he heard me enter but didn't say anything. The silence between us felt heavier than it ever had before. I couldn't tell if he knew or if he was just waiting for me to say something. "Hey, Tyler," I said, trying to keep my voice light. He gave me a small smile, but there was something about it that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Hey, Dad, everything okay?" I nodded, though I wasn't sure if I was convincing anyone, least of all myself. "Yeah, just tired. It's been a long day." Tyler didn't press. But I could see the way his eyes lingered on me, like he was trying to figure something out. It was in his gaze, in the small frown on his face, the way he seemed to be studying me more than usual. The quiet continued, stretching on for a few moments before he finally spoke again. "You know, Dad, I've been thinking," he began, his voice uncharacteristically serious. "I think I know something's up. You've been acting different lately." My heart skipped a beat. I didn't know what to say. I had always tried to protect him from the complexity of my life, but now it seemed like there was no way to hide the changes from him. "I'm not mad or anything," Tyler added quickly, almost as if he were trying to reassure me. "I just don't know what's going on." I could feel the weight of his words, the uncertainty in them. He wasn't angry, but he was aware. And that terrified me. "I'm just figuring things out, Tyler," I said softly, sitting down next to him. "And I promise, I'll explain everything when the time is right. But for now, just know that I'm doing what's best for me, and for us." Tyler nodded, but I could see the curiosity in his eyes. I knew he wasn't convinced, but he wasn't pushing. Not yet. That night, I lay in bed, the silence of the house pressing in on me. I couldn't stop thinking about the conversation with Adrian, about Tyler's growing awareness, and about the future. Everything seemed to be spiraling toward a moment I wasn't sure I was ready for. But there was no going back now. What had started with a single moment, a single choice, had led to this, an inevitable crossroads. And though I didn't have all the answers, I knew one thing for sure: whatever came next, I would face it head on. With Adrian by my side. And with the hope that Tyler would understand, even if it took time.